sandbox into best place for innovators and entrepreneurs. Thank you, Naveen, for joining. And last but not the least, we have Ms. Vanitha Datla, the chairperson CII Telangana. And she's also the executive director and CFO at Telecondia, a 50-year-old company that is a pioneer in analytic instruments industry. And in her role as Director of Finance, she was also engaged actively in the cement, power and security printing verticals. Thank you, Vanitha. Just to set the context on this very interesting topic of mainstreaming public-private partnership, we know that Indian economy has been delivering strong economic growth across the sectors of the last few years. However, for us to achieve inclusive and sustainable growth, it is very vital that we develop our infrastructure, we promote good quality healthcare, education, promote gender equality and environmental sustainability. And for all these development challenges to be, we need to search for innovative solutions, and we need to look beyond what traditionally is provided by the public sector companies. And that's where I think the public-private partnerships play a very vital role in serving and helping us to reach the poor and the underserved sections of the population. There is a growing need and an understanding that both public and private sector can come together, can collaborate and create a good ecosystem where we can promote innovation and entrepreneurship. Setting this context, I will now request Mr. Naveen to give his opening remarks on how we can create a PPP model, not from the top-down approach where we're looking at big companies, but in a small models, in a small places in the social NGO space there. And I would request Mr. K.Thaigarajan to give us some comments on his experiences in dealing with the government in the space with his foundation. And Ms. Vanitha, some opening remarks with her association with CII, what were her experiences in the PPP area. And more important, I would like the audience to interact and throw open questions to the panel to engage in this meaningful discussion. Over to you.
Thank you, Sheela. Like for us, as Sheela mentioned, PPP is not conceiving some kind of infrastructure project, or it's not a kind of something you envision some project-based kind of thing. It's a building local community. And what we do here, as our earlier speaker mentioned, we are building the ecosystem where the solution sticks. Like most of the time happen, we build a lot of solution and their life is very short. The project get over, everything is gone. So how we can create ecosystems where different stakeholders build their capabilities and move ahead. So stickiness of the solutions get better and better, better and better. So how being a government or being a private, I hate to say ourselves private, but being one of the important stakeholder, either government or civil society or market-based institutions, they all play a very, very critical role in building the local thriving economy. And in that process, how, like for example, in any policy we design, we first go, what is the big data, processes, system, etc., but we forget for whom we are making it. And then that person or that community come at the end. So how we kind of keep that community or person from very beginning and see that whatever transaction is happening, how they involve and they get participated, impacted in the process, rather than we all make everything and then try to see where that person fit. So it's a different kind of thought process in building the community. So I say that's a different kind of, as you mentioned, bottom-up ecosystem building processes, and how we kind of evaluate our roles in that process, either it's a government or civil society, or like in the morning, whatever story you have heard, they're all Nizamabad stories. And if it can happen in Hooghly, Nizamabad and other places, I'm sure it can happen everywhere in India. So in my opinion, we need to kind of see that how this, before we make a too complex thing and forget for whom we are working, if we can have some transactional and then make a, what they say that policy by proof. So if we kind of build up those kind of policy, I think we'll really see the different element of public-private partnership.
For us at Agastya, working with government is every day. So, in a sense, we operate a PPP at a transactional level every day. But involving government beyond just permissions to go to schools and run STEM programs, it brings a lot more commitment, skin in the game, investment, commitment from various stakeholders within the government, be it officials or headmasters or principals of schools or teachers and so on. So it becomes vital. But I think Desh put the nail on the head when he said, demonstrate what you can do through even small interventions on your own as an entrepreneur, as a social entrepreneur, or as a non-profit. First, get that done, break some of those local barriers on your own, and once your capability is established, at least it's partly push and partly pull. So, when there is a pull factor, as all people who have done marketing know, positioning is very important when you work with the government. That your services are wanted by the stakeholders and can be absorbed and is worthwhile doing. The moment that is established, your credibility to do a public-private partnership in a very meaningful way takes shape. Then you're able to, talk about what needs to be done, what government can contribute, what you contribute, how will you go about doing it. You will do it in one district or multiple districts, or what all shapes and sizes, what programs you will do, extents of the operation, etc. Who will fund what, etc. Typically, for instance, in Agastya's case, it's always been that we have contributed quite a bit of the capital expenditure that's required for our intervention, while the operating expenditure for multiple years, and multiple years is very important, I'll tell you why. Multiple years is provided by the government in a typical PPP kind of arrangement. So both of us bring in money as well as we bring in the expertise. What is talked about is the theme of the conference, which is we're innovating globally, but we want to bring it for local execution. Which is why we are talking to the government there, whether it's local self-government or the state government or whatever level of the government. So we provide that, and then ultimately the positives out of such a partnership, which arises out of a demonstrated work that you have done, partly push, partly pull, with commitment and skin in the game from the government. The positives are really many. Access, commitment, learning from the government. I think this is very important. A lot of people take the view that why is this happening and doesn't government? I don't think that's the approach at all. I think government does a magnificent job for the humongous size that they are in. We need to be, their work is massive. We are doing, a specific intervention. So to help government along, to be in a co-creation mode rather than in an adversarial role is one of the most important postures and positioning that we need to do when you go in for a PPP. So learning from the government, leadership from government officials and others, teachers' commitment, and of course the monetary support that you get for operating something in a specific area, state, district or taluk or whatever it is. Why is long-term partnership important? Because you're putting a lot of skin in the game. You're recruiting people. One part is the money that you invest as a co-creator. But more important is your commitment to people. As an our most important commitment is to people that you have recruited and you are putting in. You can't suddenly pull the rug. So you need some longevity, and therefore any PPP that you do with government, it's worthwhile to look at least a 3 to 5 year time frame for it to come to fruition, for people to have that longevity to make things happen. So that is important. You know, sometimes it looks all rosy from what I said, but there are pitfalls as well. The pitfalls are very definitely expect a lot of delays. Expect delays in fruition of the agreements. You have to be patient, very, very patient. You have to deal with multiple levels of the government. You cannot do top down, you have to do bottoms up and top down and make sure that they meet in the middle. And you know, payment issues are always there. You know, is it provided in the budget, and will they pay my bills, and are there nandis in between? All kinds of issues come. Distractions happen in your program. You set out to do something, somebody else wants you to teach English. That's not your word, but that's what they want you to do, and you've got to be, you know, careful about what you are getting into. So distractions is something that happens. Frequent changes of leadership is one of the greatest issues that we have faced in our PPP models, where the new person takes time to learn what happened there, has a different idea about the whole thing, and therefore things get delayed, and then in the meantime he's transferred again. You know, in my home state of Karnataka, I've had 6 SPDs in 1 year. 1 year, everybody 2 months on average. So it just doesn't work, and that is a big issue. And uncertainty over people in a short-term agreement mode. These are clearly some of the things. If I can mention one do's and don'ts kind of a thing before I hand over to Vanitha. When you are getting into a PPP mode, one of the nuances or one of the things that most here will agree with, and even government officials repeatedly tell us, go with a very clear agreement, preferably a GO, so that it survives multiple administrations, multiple officials, multiple political changes and so on, and make sure that whatever you need to get it done, whatever they need to get it done, is all put on paper, because what's written and what is followed, that's the law and not what you think should happen. Then there is a PPP with the government. But once you go through these hurdles, it's the way to go, and it's very, very possible to do. We are there in Karnataka in a very big way. We are there in Haryana in a big way. There are several other governments who have approached us, and that's the pull factor that today we get, because we have become pretty large, meeting over 1.5 million children, 6-7 times a year, 150 mobile labs, 60 science centers, 1,000 people executing what we do best, which is hands-on learning, creativity, curiosity, confidence, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dev. Yeah. I'd also like you to share with us, as chairperson of the CIA, in where are the areas of collaboration that you foresee, with specific reference to women, be it in the skill employment, development, or mentoring.
Thank you, Sheela, and I'd like to thank Reddy and Deshpande for inviting me here today to the Development Dialogue 2016 on Agastya Sandbox. It's really a privilege to be here, and the inspirational stories I've been listening from morning. Now, working with CI since the last few years, CI has its own foundation called the CI Foundation, and we bring about all the stakeholders, whether it is the corporates with all the CSR funds, or the NGOs who are actually having all parting expertise, and the government with all their initiatives, especially on the social front. So a couple of initiatives that I have recently taken part is skilling, in the skilling area, and skilling of tribal girls, especially you're talking about women empowerment. And we see a lot of these girls in the rural areas that actually have the wherewithal to actually stand up on their own 2 feet. But due to the societal pressures, they are being forced to give up either their education or their vocation, and then cater to their household chores and household domestic chores. So we actually at CI took this project in the rural area of Moderator, and for the period of 3 years, we had actually trained close to 500 girls in the age group of 15 to 21, and we have actually imparted tailoring skills to these girls. And a lot of the corporates from our membership actually came forward and donated sewing machines at the end of the training period. So today, most of these girls would actually come from very, very, very poor backgrounds, who actually could not afford funding their own education, going back to high school, getting a high school diploma. They're not only funding themselves, but also funding their own brothers and other male siblings in the family. So about a year ago, I actually visited one of the tandas. So that's where the CI Foundation comes into place, bridges that connects all the dots and ensures, especially if you look at our membership, though we have a pan-Indian membership of close to 9,000 members, 75% of them come from the MSME sector. And knowing the MSME sector, most of them don't have the time actually, or the resources to actually spend too much of time on trying to scout out projects for their CSR activities. So that's where this foundation comes into force, and we look at projects that are actually viable, that are actually suitable, and we try to then get them to collect all their funds together, pull them out from the resources, and ensure that certain projects are taken over. And as Mr. Dagarajan had spoken, co-creation along with the government and sustainability is really important. So we try to ensure that this happens.
I think we'll open the floor for interactions and questions from the audience, from the panel.
I'm Satish from Varangal and Lodi NGO. We are working for the past 50 years. Day before yesterday, we have celebrated our 50 years Golden Jubilee. So we have come here to know about the CSR funds. So we have been talking about working with the children for girl education. There is any scope for working in our area in Varangal also, meaning most of them are tribal area, meaning skill development trainings are there for tribal girls.
Were you asking for CSR funds for your project, for your NGO?
Yeah. Now.
So what normally the NGOs that we work with normally get registered with the CIF Foundation. So there is a process that we will have to go through. So you can write to me and we will see how we can get you enlisted into that registration process.
Thank you.
Next question, please.
Very good afternoon. My name is Chandra. I am from Nirman organization. I have a question to K.Thaigarajan sir. Sir, when you are talking about partnerships with government, the kind of challenges that you are sharing, we were feeling, yes, this is happening to us, this is happening to us, and each and every point we were actually going through these challenges. So, but then we are not an organization which has a good scale or some kind of corpus funds, which is making us very difficult to continue our operations. So, what strategy would you suggest in dealing with government for organizations who don't have, some kind of corpus?
I think Desh answered that. I think entrepreneurs build credibility first, and I think that's what I said too. So even a social entrepreneur is not exempt from that if you have to work with the government, because if you start working with government right at the beginning, or you need them with financial participation right at the beginning, you're setting yourself up on a slightly longer path with higher risks than if you're on your own in a small area. I think that's what you should watch out for. And therefore, building credibility in small interventions that you have done, where you have demonstrated that it's possible to do, a few of those, I would think is the fundamental part of that strategy. So this may be a little bit of repetition, but that's what it is. If you reach out too high right at the beginning saying, I want statewide help from the government and so on, it can happen. I'm not saying it can't, but it's going to be a long and arduous thing, and the amount of time and money and energy that you need to spend before you succeed in that may be far tougher than if you take the building early and then having the pull kind of strategy. I would think that that is probably the best way to go about build credibility, then automatically, PPPs can work for you.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, this is Vamsi Krishna. My question is to Vanitha ma'am. Actually, I have a couple of questions. First question is like CSR could be one of the primary funding source, especially in the interior areas, because if you evaluate the overall market size of CSR spending, it's around 20,000 crores every year. But the recent report says that nearly 40 to 50% of companies failed to meet their CSR targets in the last 2 years. So what would be the landscape in order to channelize these funds to create a maximum impact wherever it is possible? And the second question is, mostly the CSR spending activities somehow relates to the core business of corporates. In terms of pushing or making corporates to spend in some tribal areas or interior areas where the business interest might be less, but the need of the funds is more. So how could we deal with that?
I couldn't get your second question, but I'll answer the first question. You're talking about the total outlay of CSR funds that have not come up to mark, as you have said. I think today the company's report or our company's annual report also mandates that you have to actually reveal how much of CSR spend your company has actually expended during that year. So I'm sure in times to come, since this notification has just come a couple of years back, I'm sure in time it's going to increase and multiply. The second question, I couldn't get the gist of it. You were not very clear with your second part of it.
I'll just give a small anecdotal experience. So we are part of an organization which we provide professional CSR consulting services.
Okay.
So we've been working, we've tried to work with one of the FMCG company. So where they plan to push out nutrition program, but probably when we come up with some idea where we need to target on very highly malnourished people, especially in the tribal areas, the importance of nutrition awareness is more. But the point being is that our project has been denied, saying that their business interests have been not there. So my point is like...
Just a minute. You say that you want to teach nutritional aspects to tribal people.
No, it's not about teaching, it's more about creating awareness.
Creating awareness, but your project has been turned down by whom?
I don't want to name the client. The FMCG company. So the point being, my larger question is, mostly the CSR spending of companies is perceived to be like they're spending primarily directed according to their core business ideology. But the need for spending CSR funds sometimes will be more in the areas where the business interests of the companies might not be there.
No, see, what I can tell you from our experience also, we have so many member companies. Normally companies would like to spend their CSR funds in their own vicinity. If you have a factory in a very remote location, normally that company would like to spend money around its own location. It doesn't want to go to the neighboring district or to the neighboring state. Though the requirement may be somewhere else, it's very difficult to actually change their mindset. So that's where I think real reputed or reputable organizations and NGOs like yourself should probably gain the credibility of industry. So then, industry does not actually have to spend its time or its resources on trying to do its own CSR, rather than just give the funds to some NGO to actually impart on that, on their aspect, on their core competency. So unless you gain the credibility of industry, it's very difficult for somebody to just come and fund you on those aspects.
Thank you. Naveen, specific questions from Naveen with Lee and Agastya Stanford. What do you foresee are the possible specific areas of collaboration between public and private in this for the social development space?
Look, we are private energy, and private energy, the beauty is that it's always small, and the government is big daddy. They have tons. So how we can prioritize that? We can see a lot of innovation. Like for example, in Kakatiya Sandbox, we have seeded 9 different initiatives or organizations here, and in last 2 years they have shown some of the results. And continuous commitment is not that we are trying to do the commitment what we made, but now we are seeing those things are sparking here and there. And I say that innovation is good, it's done through private energy. Now innovation is ready how it can multiply. So government has that multiplier capability, and especially in case of Agastya or LEAD or some of our agriculture program, they have shown some kind of they're reaching like a tipping point kind of thing, where if like we have 1, 2, 4, 5, 7 touch points where they have shown the result. So now how it can scale it up, that's where we need a bigger support of the ecosystem, that they can play the role. And that's where we see that the private energy can be used to innovate the thing, and the public energy, when it's validated, things are working, you put whatever metrics, verified it, once you say that okay, it's reached to the level, let's multiply. And that's where we see that the mainstream institution can play the heavy role in kind of spreading that impact at the bigger level. And an example is Agastya itself here.
Yeah. Jack, one question to you is, how do you measure your impact on the beneficiaries? Is there any model that we can learn from?
Before I go into that, just add to what Naveen said with respect to what can you specifically do here in Islamabad. As we speak, we are looking for government to participate meaningfully in creating an ecosystem of our own, which is in operation in other states. For instance, in Hooghly Sandbox, they supported us for a few years, made us do that demonstrated model of success, and then we have successfully transitioned it into a PPP with the Karnataka government and so on, in which they are also partners. So that's what we are looking to do in Islamabad by creating an ecosystem of STEM learning, curiosity, creativity, confidence creation amongst government school children with science centers, maybe in campus, maybe several mobile labs and other innovations that we do like lab in a box, lab on a bike and so on. So that's to answer or add to what Naveen answered about specifics for Islamabad and Telangana as a whole. To come to your question on impact, we do have elaborate models of impact assessment. How does the child, the final stakeholder, improve by the hands-on learning methods that we provide to them? How do they enhance their participation, conceptual ability, interaction, interest, discovery, problem solving, project-based learning? All of these we have a model which is also created along with IIM Bangalore as the partner for framework, which we implement along with our programs in most areas, and that has provided the kind of impact that we have had. And we can broadly conclude from what we have done over the last 10-15 years in various geographies that any child who has received more than 6 to 7 visits from Agastya's either mobile lab or they have come to the science center has very definitely gone up in curiosity, creativity, and interest in the specific subjects. And ultimately the proof of it is the child learns to learn. That's what we have found from an impact perspective. Learning physics, learning chemistry, etc. below this meta skill of learning to learn. And that's what we try and do. And our impact assessment studies have proved that that really happens.
So one question to any one of you is that does the person heading the organization, the credentials of the person also have an impact when you're dealing with the government, because you're going to see people like Mr. Deshpande, such kind of private partnerships, it does add credibility. So do you agree with that in terms of, the person heading the organization brings in additional value into the entire relationship?
I agree wholeheartedly. Definitely.
So friends, we have just a couple of questions, 1 or 2 questions from the audience for the panel before we conclude. One last question. Garu.
I am associated with an organization called Saraswati Vidyapita. I am associated with a voluntary organization in the education field called Saraswati Vidyapita. We educate about 600 primitive tribals students from different categories like Kondareddis, Gods and Chenchus. So in the residential schools we do that, and I am very happy to say that at all India level, the sports competition, they always stand first or second. And these are mostly the Bhadrachalam areas, Kondareddis and Utturu, the Gods and Chenchus of Nalamalai Hills. So we have got residential schools at Bhadrachalam and Achambe and one at say Rampur. For girls we have got in Hyderabad. So most of these students, they are sponsored by some of the individuals, but we are not able to get the total help from the government. Especially the tribal health department, as actually they used to give the funds earlier. Now all the funds are diverted to some private schools, but not the organization which is giving really. So I request Vanitha whether any help can be given to this institution. This supports, you can see that is in the tribal area of Bhadrachalam. They are doing wonderful work. All dedicated gang of teachers, they are working. And each village we prefer only one student from each village so that it can be enlightened. And all those villages in the tribal area of Bhadrachalam are hardly 3 or 4 houses. So our idea is to cover a maximum number of villages and create awakening. So this is my request. Second request, under CSR funds, Karnataka SBI has given one donated one mobile van for Agastya that's operating in Nizamabad. I approached the DGM here for a mobile van, second van for the Agastya, but there was no response. He said we have to get approval from the board. So in that case, today we are going to represent to collector, but any help from the CSR funds can be done. And what is the procedure to operate?
Thank you.
Thank you for the deep love and affection that you have for our organization and the great support and contribution that you have provided. I echo sentiments on support, and we're working on it as well with not just the government but also with other organizations that can support, so that it can be a tripartite thing, that more interventions can happen in Islamabad and around the state. Thank you.
So sir, you've actually mentioned very relevant areas of interventions that companies can actually do. Definitely if you write to us, sir, or if you give me the information, we'll see what best we can do. What we've seen in the past is normally industries, if they are in the vicinity of the areas that we tend to fund the CSR funds, it becomes all the more easier for us to actually convince them to impart their CSR funds. So on that front, let me pitch, we don't have any members from CIR from Nizamabad. So the industries from Nizamabad can become CIR members. We'll do our level best to chapter here, and that we also channelize all the CSR funds from this district into the district itself. But sir, please write to me and we'll see how we can take this forward.
Let me rephrase that question. Sir is asking one mobile van from CII. Is it right, sir? Yeah.
So thank you very much. Thank you to all the panelists for
Thank you very much. I think with that last question, there was a great expectation and action items also have been done. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.